Alaska, technically still summer, but the air had that sharp, metallic chill that reminded you exactly where you were. Inside a conference center wrapped in layers of security, two men sat facing each other at a long table polished enough to reflect their faces back at them. Donald Trump, 45th, and again 47th, President of the United States, hair as defiant as ever, tie, a shade of red that probably had its own trademark. Across from him, Vladimir Vladimirovich Putin. Former KGB officer, master of the controlled stare, the kind of man who could make a compliment sound like a threat. And a threat sound like a business proposal. Officially, the meeting was about Ukraine. Ending the war, ceasefire agreements, humanitarian corridors, in other words, the usual checklist for a peace talk, but the atmosphere in the room wasn't the polite frost of standard diplomacy, it was something else, an odd, humming tension. Like the air before a lightning strike, Trump had been briefed. He knew Putin was unpredictable, but nothing could have prepared him for what came next. Putin leaned forward, elbows resting lightly on the table. His voice dropped to that quiet, deliberate register he used when he wanted every word to feel heavier than it should. I have studied the history of your first lady, he began, her photographs. Trump blinked, the smile that usually meant I'm in control faltered for just a fraction of a second. Photographs? He asked. Putin nodded once. Melania. Your wife. The collections. The modeling. Before the White House. The air seemed to thicken, no mention of tanks, no talk of sanctions, just photos. Then Putin leaned in further. In Russia, we appreciate beauty. We collect it. We preserve it. I have seen many of the old images. They are timeless. Trump shifted in his chair, aides on both sides exchanged quick, sidelong glances, and then, the hammer drop. I will agree to a ceasefire, Putin said slowly. I will withdraw the troops. But only if she comes to Sochi, spends one night at my beach estate, and allows me a new collection, exclusive for me. For several seconds, nobody moved, not Trump, not the translators, not even the Secret Service detail near the door. It was as if the entire room had been vacuum sealed. This wasn't just an unorthodox request, this was an insult, or maybe a compliment twisted into a weapon. What made it stranger was that Putin's fixation wasn't entirely out of the blue. Over the past year, Russian state TV had aired segments featuring Melania Trump's old modeling photos. Sometimes they were tied to discussions about Western elegance. Other times, they appeared during slow news days, accompanied by sentimental music and soft focus filters, as if Melania had somehow become part of Russia's official cultural programming. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky had once joked in an interview, if Putin stared at my wife's pictures instead of moving tanks, maybe the war would already be over. It had been meant as humor. But perhaps there was a sliver of truth in it after all. The Alaska meeting ended without cameras, without handshakes in front of flags. The official press release spoke of constructive dialogue and possible pathways to peace. It did not mention beaches, photo shoots, or the First Lady, but the story leaked anyway. It began with a single cryptic post from a journalist in Anchorage, a woman with a reputation for getting things slightly right, just often enough to keep people watching her feed. On Twitter, she wrote, Putin made an unusual personal request to Trump. Involving the First Lady, more soon. The internet pounced. Within an hour, hashtags were everywhere, hashtag Melania diplomacy, hashtag beach ceasefire, and, inevitably, hashtag Putin's photo deal. Speculation was wild. Some thought Putin wanted Melania to attend a Russian cultural gala as a symbolic guest, others suspected some bizarre PR stunt, a few conspiracy accounts insisted it was code for an arms deal. No one guessed the truth, not yet. 3 days later, an Estonian blog, known for its mix of actual leaks and wild fiction, published what it claimed was a partial transcript of the Alaska meeting. It was short, but the key line was unmistakable. She comes to Sochi. One night. We make new photographs. Then I end war. Beneath it were screenshots from an old Russian TV segment showing Melania in her 20s, walking along a beach in a silk gown, the Black Sea behind her. The captions were in Russian. Translated, they read, a beauty that could stop a war. The backlash was immediate. On Facebook, one user wrote, so peace in Europe now depends on a swimsuit shoot? This is insane. On Twitter, a sarcastic post went viral, just give him the pictures. Add a selfie filter. World saved. Cable news had a field day. One American host asked, "Is this diplomacy? Or a midlife crisis with nuclear weapons?" In Kiev, Zelensky addressed reporters with a tight smile. "We welcome all serious discussions about ending the war," he said, then, after a pause, "but Ukraine will not be part of whatever this is." The story didn't die, it mutated. Russian media began replaying old clips of Melania on their talk shows. Panelists debated which of her photos was most iconic. One particularly surreal segment featured a retired general describing the strategic value of beauty. Western late-night hosts turned it into running jokes. Meme accounts posted photoshops of Putin holding a massive leather-bound photo album, smiling like a man who'd just found buried treasure. Meanwhile, in Washington, aides tried to contain the fire. Some insisted the quote was fabricated, others quietly admitted it wasn't far from the truth. One unnamed staffer told a reporter, "Look, we're exploring all options. If one photo shoot ends a war, we have to at least look at the feasibility." The reporter's follow-up question, "Does the First Lady agree?" went unanswered. Melania herself remained silent. She was seen leaving a gallery opening in New York, ignoring shouted questions from photographers. One tabloid claimed she was considering her position. Another ran a headline, "Melania caught between marriage and world peace." By late August, the story had gone global. In France, a satirical paper printed a fake peace treaty with a blank signature line for Melania Trump, First Lady of Peace. In Japan, a variety show recreated the Alaska meeting with actors, complete with exaggerated dramatic pauses. Even in Russia, where state media usually avoided anything that could embarrass the president, the coverage took on a strange, almost celebratory tone. One anchor opened a segment by saying, "History has many paths to peace. Perhaps this will be the most beautiful." Yet beneath the absurdity, the war ground on. Shells fell on Kharkiv, families fled Odessa. Zelensky pleaded with Western allies for more support, warning that while Moscow plays games, lives are being lost every hour. It was a reminder that behind the headlines and the memes, real people were still in danger. Still, the demand hung in the air. Trump, who understood the value of spectacle better than anyone, didn't dismiss it outright. Instead, he dodged questions, smiled cryptically, and told one rally crowd, "We might have a very creative solution. A beautiful solution. We'll see." The crowd laughed, cheered, and chanted his name, but no one could tell if he was serious. And so, by September, the question wasn't whether Putin had made the request, it was whether Trump would agree. Somewhere in Sochi, photographers cleaned their lenses. Somewhere in Washington, strategists weighed the political cost against the human cost. And somewhere in Moscow, a television producer edited together a new montage of Melania's early work. This time set to the national anthem. The proposal was out in the world now, and whether it was comedy, tragedy, or farce, the world couldn't look away. It didn't take long before Washington stopped pretending this was a fringe rumor. By the first week of September, the Melania clause, as journalists had started calling it, was dominating the news cycle, not just in America, not just in Russia, everywhere. On Capitol Hill, Republicans and Democrats found themselves in the rare position of agreeing. At least about how bizarre it all was. For the Republicans, the split was obvious. Some were fiercely loyal to Trump, ready to defend almost anything he did, or might do. Others feared the optics. A senator from Texas went on Fox News and said, "Look, I'm all for creative diplomacy. But this is like trying to solve the Cuban Missile Crisis with a swimsuit calendar." The host nearly choked trying not to laugh. Democrats, meanwhile, saw an opening. At a press conference, one congresswoman from California raised her eyebrows and said, "We believe in peace. But not at the expense of turning the First Lady into a bargaining chip. This is not America's next top model. This is foreign policy." Her clip went viral. On Twitter, someone posted it with the caption, "Nancy just dropped the mic on Putin's photo shoot fantasy." The political theater reached new heights when a live debate on CNN brought together two commentators, one a pro-Trump strategist, the other a retired diplomat. The pro-Trump strategist argued, "If this is what it takes to end the war, and the First Lady consents, why not? It's her choice. The outcome could be historic." The retired diplomat's face was priceless. He blinked twice, leaned forward, and replied, "Because diplomacy is not supposed to be a bizarre episode of The Bachelor, that's why." Viewers at home couldn't get enough. Clips flooded TikTok with captions like, "Cold War 2.0 but make it reality TV." Across the ocean, Zelensky kept a careful tone. He didn't want to alienate Trump, he still needed U.S. support, but he also couldn't ignore the circus surrounding the talks. In a late-night video address from Kiev, he said, "Our people suffer every day. Our soldiers fight every day. We cannot allow our future to depend on personal arrangements that have nothing to do with the security of Ukraine." On Facebook, a Ukrainian user shared the clip, adding, translation, "He's as confused as the rest of us." But confusion was only part of it, there was fascination, too. Social media sleuths began digging for every scrap of Melania's modeling history. Some posted entire photo compilations, labeling them Putin's wishlist. Others created parody top 10 lists, rating her outfits from ceasefire chic to NATO neutral. On Reddit, a popular thread in r/world politics read, "If Putin loves these pictures so much, why not just Photoshop him into them and call it a day?" The top reply was brutal, "Because he wants the experience. Comrade." The rumor mill didn't stop there. By mid-September, a new leak hit the internet, supposedly from a Kremlin insider. It claimed Putin had an entire private gallery dedicated to famous political spouses. According to the leak, the walls were lined with framed portraits, Jackie Kennedy, Grace Kelly, even a young Jill Biden, and now, an empty space reserved for Melania. Russian state media called the report Western nonsense. But they didn't exactly deny it either. One evening, a Moscow talk show lit up the airwaves. The host, a charismatic man in his 50s, opened with, "The West thinks we are obsessed. But is it obsession? Or appreciation?" Behind him, a massive screen displayed a slow-motion montage of Melania's runway walks from the early 2000s. Set to swelling orchestral music, in the corner of the screen, the words appeared in bold gold letters, "A beauty worth peace." Back in the US, the late-night hosts were having the time of their lives. One joked, "I don't know if this is diplomacy or a weird James Bond plot, but either way, I can't wait for the sequel." Another quipped, "If Melania actually goes to Sochi, does she bring Secret Service? Or just her best lighting crew?" Meanwhile, the war raged on. Russian artillery shelled positions in eastern Ukraine. Ukrainian drones struck supply depots near the border. In Kherson, families hid in basements as sirens wailed, and yet, in many living rooms, people were talking less about troop movements and more about the hypothetical logistics of a presidential spouse's photo shoot. By the third week of September, Trump himself broke the silence, sort of. At a rally in Florida, he hinted, "We're in talks. Very interesting talks. You wouldn't believe how creative some of these solutions are. Some people say it's crazy. I say, maybe it's brilliant." The crowd roared, but in Washington, aides buried their faces in their hands. 2 days later, a second transcript leak emerged. This one included an alleged exchange between Trump and a senior advisor after the Alaska meeting. The advisor supposedly said, "Sir, we can't agree to this. It's insane." Trump allegedly replied, "It's not insane if it works. Think about the Nobel Peace Prize. Think about the ratings." The White House dismissed it as fiction. But by then, the meme cycle had already claimed it. On Twitter, a user posted the quote with a photoshopped Nobel medal, except instead of Alfred Nobel, the medal featured Melania's face. The U.S. intelligence community also got dragged into the mess. Anonymous sources told reporters they were concerned about the precedent such a deal would set. One unnamed official said, "If you give in to one bizarre personal request, you open the door to more. Next thing you know, we'll be trading state secrets for concert tickets." International allies were torn. Some quietly hoped Trump could pull off a ceasefire by any means necessary. Others feared the damage to credibility. The British Foreign Secretary said, "We would welcome peace, but the process must uphold dignity and international norms." On Twitter, someone retorted, "Says the country that sent Boris Johnson to Kiev in a sweater." In the middle of it all, one figure remained silent, Melania. Her absence from public events only fueled the speculation. Then, one Friday evening, she appeared, unannounced, at a charity gala in Manhattan. She smiled for the cameras but took no questions. Her gown was cream silk. Her earrings caught the light in a way that made the photographs look almost like a deliberate callback to her modeling days. The tabloids pounced. One headline blared, "Melania's gala look, a signal to Putin." In Moscow, the state broadcaster ran the footage within hours. One commentator remarked, "If this is a signal, it is a beautiful one." And somewhere in Sochi, the beach estate's guest wing was reportedly undergoing renovations. By early October, the situation had spiraled into a full-blown culture war. Conservative talk radio hosts debated whether personal diplomacy was a legitimate strategy. Progressive podcasts mocked the idea as foreign policy via Vogue magazine. On Instagram, influencers weighed in with mock fashion tips, how to dress for geopolitical negotiations. The Kremlin, sensing opportunity, turned up the heat. A new Russian TV special aired, showing a retrospective of historic moments of peace, but between footage of the Yalta Conference and the fall of the Berlin Wall, they inserted shots of Melania in designer gowns. The narrator intoned, history remembers not only the treaties, but the symbols. As absurd as it all seemed, the stakes were deadly serious. For every day without a ceasefire, Ukrainian casualties mounted. For every headline about Melania's dresses, there was another family displaced, another school destroyed, and yet the spectacle rolled on. On October 5, Trump gave an interview to a friendly news outlet, asked about the so-called Melania clause. He smiled and said, "Let's just say, the First Lady is a very important person. Very important. And she might be part of a very big win for peace." That was all it took. Cable networks replayed the clip on a loop. In Kiev, Zelensky's staff reportedly watched in silence, trying to decide whether to laugh or scream. Back online, the comments kept pouring in. On Twitter, I saw one post, "I used to think diplomacy was boring. Now it's my favorite reality show." On Facebook, someone posted, "If this works, I'm sending my ex's pics to North Korea." On Reddit, the top comment of the day read, "Somewhere, Kissinger is looking down and whispering, 'Nice.'" By the end of the month, the world was split into two camps, those who thought the photo deal was a dangerous embarrassment, and those who thought it was crazy enough to work. And in the middle of it all, Melania Trump, still silent, still beautiful, and, according to one tabloid, still considering her position on peace. The war of words was only getting louder, and the photographs hadn't even been taken yet. For weeks, the world had been talking about her, but she hadn't said a single word, until now. It was the morning of October 20th, Washington was gray, draped in that kind of cold fog that makes everything feel like a spy movie. Cameras were set up outside the White House, journalists stamped their feet against the chill, and then, the First Lady stepped out. Melania Trump, in a navy coat, hair perfectly set, walked to the podium. She didn't look left or right, no nod to the reporters, just straight ahead. When she spoke, her voice was calm. Almost too calm. "I have heard many things about what is being said, about me, about my photographs, about the beach." She paused, let it sink in. "I will say this, peace is important, life is important, but I am not a diplomatic currency. I will not be traded." The cameras clicked like machine gun fire, reporters shouted questions, but she held up a hand. "I have been a model, I have been a First Lady, I am my own person. If anyone wishes to end a war, they should speak to leaders, not to me, not to my wardrobe." With that, she turned and walked back inside. The door shut. It took less than 10 minutes for the video to go viral. On Twitter, I saw a post that read, "Melania just shut down Putin like a Bond girl with a law degree." On Facebook, someone wrote, "Queen behavior." Also, what beach were they talking about? The internet split instantly. Some called it a brave stand, others said it was a mistake that could cost peace. In Moscow, the statement hit like a slap. That evening, Russian state TV aired a special segment. Putin himself appeared in studio, something he rarely did for live broadcasts. He sat in his usual posture, hands folded, gaze steady. "I have great respect for the First Lady," he began. "She is correct to defend her dignity, but I must remind everyone, my request was never about trading, it was about symbols, about beauty that brings peace." He smiled faintly, a practiced smile. "If she does not come, then we will find another path. But perhaps a less beautiful one." The phrase "less beautiful path" became the next meme cycle. On Reddit, someone posted a picture of a tank painted pink with the caption, "Putin's Plan B." On TikTok, users stitched Melania's speech with footage of model runway walks, ending with the words, "Diplomacy, but make it fashion." But behind the jokes, the war continued. Ukrainian artillery hit Russian positions near Luhansk. Russian drones attacked Odessa's port. Civilians huddled in basements as power lines went down. In Kiev, Zelensky released a short video. His face was drawn, his voice measured. "We do not know what will happen next, but we will not stop defending our home. Whether peace comes through treaties or through photo shoots, Ukraine will survive. On Facebook, a user commented, "That man could read a grocery list and still sound like he's holding the line against history." Then came the leak, not the transcript leaks, not the tabloid gossip, something different. An anonymous email landed in the inbox of a British newspaper. It claimed to be a secret audio recording from the White House, a conversation between Trump and a close aide just 2 days after Melania's public refusal. In the audio, Trump allegedly says, "She said no. Fine. But maybe we get someone else. Somebody he likes. The point is peace." The aide replies, "Sir, that's not how diplomacy works." Trump, "It is if you're me." The White House called it fabricated trash. But the paper released the transcript anyway. It spread like wildfire. Theories bloomed overnight. Some claimed Trump had a backup list of high-profile women to send to Sochi. Others swore it was all an elaborate negotiation tactic, that Melania's refusal was scripted to force Putin into a public climb down. On Twitter, I saw a post, "Plot twist, Zelensky's wife steps in, peace signed in 24 hours." It had 300,000 likes in a day. By late October, the pressure was suffocating, markets jittered, European diplomats whispered about the danger of letting personalities dictate policy. In Moscow, the beach estate in Sochi was quietly put on limited access, officially for seasonal maintenance. In Washington, Trump summoned his closest advisors, according to yet another leak, this time from someone claiming to be in the room. The meeting was tense. One advisor argued, "We can't keep entertaining this. It's humiliating. For you. For the country." Another countered, "If it stops the war, humiliation is cheap." Trump reportedly looked at them both, tapped the table, and said, "It's not humiliation if I win." Meanwhile, Melania vanished again from public view. No galas, no charity events, nothing. Tabloids speculated wildly. Was she furious? Was she in secret talks? One headline screamed, "Melania's silence, calm before the beach." Then, out of nowhere, a Russian gossip site published something new, photos, allegedly taken inside Putin's Sochi estate, showing a freshly redecorated guest suite, silk sheets, white roses, a balcony view over the Black Sea. The article described it as a room prepared for someone important. The Kremlin dismissed it as fantasy journalism. But the seed was planted. In early November, Trump made another public hint. At a rally in Ohio, he told the crowd, "We're getting very close to something incredible, a beautiful ending, an ending people will talk about for 100 years. He didn't mention Melania. He didn't have to. In Kiev, Zelensky's patience seemed to snap. At a press briefing, he said, "Ukraine's future will not be decided on a beach in Sochi. We fight for our land, not for the entertainment of Moscow." The statement drew applause in Ukraine, and polite silence elsewhere. No one wanted to be the one to say aloud what everyone knew, that the bizarre beauty clause had become entangled with real diplomatic momentum. Then, the shocker, on November 12, Melania reappeared, but not in Washington, not in New York, in Paris. Photographers caught her stepping out of a black car outside the Russian embassy. She wore dark sunglasses, a beige coat, and carried nothing but a small clutch. When asked why she was there, she said only, "I am having conversations," and disappeared inside. The images hit the internet like a missile. On Twitter, I saw someone write, "She's doing the Paris leg of the Sochi tour." On Facebook, another comment read, "If this is the prelude to peace, I'm not even mad." CNN ran the footage on loop. In Moscow, state TV opened with the headline, "First Lady engages with Russia, peace moves forward." No one knew what was discussed in Paris, but 3 days later, Putin made an unplanned televised address. "Russia is ready to consider alternative arrangements," he said, "but the spirit of the original request remains. Beauty can end war, the world must decide if it wants to try." He didn't name Melania, but he didn't need to. By now, the lines between diplomacy, celebrity gossip, and absurdist theater had completely dissolved. Commentators debated whether history would record this as a turning point or a national embarrassment. Memes flourished faster than fact checks, and in the middle of it all, the war, the actual war, dragged on. Late one night, another leak surfaced, this one a single image. No source. It showed a balcony, white roses, a camera tripod set up in the corner. The caption, in Russian, simply read, "Soon." The next morning, Trump tweeted, "Big things coming. Maybe the biggest ever for peace. Watch closely." Putin, hours later, released a single sentence through his press office: "The sun will rise over the Black Sea." In Washington, reporters begged for clarity. They didn't get it. In Kiev, Zelensky said nothing at all. In Moscow, the state broadcaster cut to a slow-motion shot of waves hitting the Sochi shore, and somewhere, maybe in Paris, maybe in Sochi, maybe in the White House itself, someone was deciding whether a camera shutter might change the course of history. The world leaned forward, the clock ticked. And the question hung in the air like the cold before a storm: would beauty really end the war? So, what just happened? We started in Alaska. With 2 presidents, a war, and a proposal nobody could have predicted. We watched the Melania clause turn from a whisper into a political firestorm, from Capitol Hill debates to Russian TV love letters to Parisian shadows and balcony roses, and now, we stand at the edge of something utterly ridiculous, or maybe, utterly historic. Would beauty really end the war, or has the world simply been watching the strangest episode of international politics in modern history? Tell me what you think in the comments. Would you take the deal, or walk away? If you enjoyed this story, hit like, drop your thoughts below, and subscribe for more, because in the next episode, we're going to Paris, we're going to Sochi, and we're going to find out exactly what happens when the camera starts clicking.